It's just preparing. Yes, now you can go, please.
This meeting is being live streamed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, if you
Got
want
it.
to introduce yourself, please, you can introduce yourself and whatever way. It's your 1 hour.
Well, my name is Giovanni Matteucci. I'm a mediator and training mediation in Italy. I've been a previous banker, and I also interested in prevention of financial crisis of small and medium firm. Now in Italy, it's changing also something. They try also to apply negotiation in this prevention. And it will be very, very interesting to see what it will happen. And also there will be new measures by the government just to spread the ADRs in Italy. I think that is quite sufficient. I don't think. Okay. Vikram.
Please go ahead. It's your 1 hour. I won't say anything.
Okay.
Whenever you want us to come in, we'll come in only then. Nothing before that.
Okay. The culture of mediation in Italy, 2021. Italy is a country in Southern Europe. It covers an area of 3,000 square kilometers and has an estimated population of 60 million people. It is a peninsula inside the Mediterranean Sea. And during 3,000 years of history, all the people who lived on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea and many others from Central, Northern, and Eastern Europe passed through its land. Some of them stayed for centuries. Therefore, the history, the legislation, the music, the food. In other words, the culture of Italy is an incredible fusion of huge different traditions, and the culture of mediation belongs to them. The first written collection of laws in the Western world is attributed to Zaleuco or Leucippe Zafiri, who lived in the 7th century before Christ in southern Italy, along the Ionian Sea, then a colony of Greece. It is forbidden to undertake a judgment between two people if conciliation has not been attempted beforehand. In other words, in the 7th century before Christ, mandatory mediation. 5th century BC, in the Roman Republic, laws of the 12 tables, rem ubi pacunt orato, is the Latin sentence. If the parties come to an agreement, the judge issued a sentence. In the Imperial Rome, the 1st and 5th century AC, there were the Defensores Civitatum, defenders of the cities, a local, paternal, pacific, trustworthy magistracy invested with a limited and jurisdiction, which can be said to contain the seed. There was, however, a period when the recourse to conciliation was not very well regarded by the Roman legislator. According to Lorenzo Scamuzzi, the Roman Emperor Caligula, not knowing how else to supply the public treasury, squandered by his oddities, created a heavy tax on litigation, no less than 40% of the amount in dispute, and consequently, conciliation was considered as a contravention in fraud of the treasury, and as usual, taxation. The Christian religion was born in Palestine, but developed in Italy, Rome. In the Gospel, according to Matthew, make an early agreement with your adversary while you are on the road with him, to avoid him giving you up to the judge and the judge to the guard, and you be thrown into prison. Paul the Apostle, first letter to the Corinthians. If you are therefore quarreling about things of these words, do you take as judges people without authority in the church? So that there will be no wise person among you who could arbitrate between brother and brother. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church often mediated in disputes, both between private individuals at local level and also between nations. However, this function was mainly linked to the political prominence of the ecclesiastical institution, as its doctrine emphasized forgiveness rather than conciliation, which took shape in the territories of the Italian monasteries in the late in Padua, in the north of Italy, at the beginning of the 13th century, through the intercession of the Blessed Friar Antonio, corporal punishment of bankruptcy was replaced by the cessio bonorum, handover of goods. Then, in the various cities, the safe conduct called fida began to be granted more and more. The fugitive or banished bankrupt could re-enter the town without being thrown into prison for a limited period in order to come to an agreement with his creditors. Between 13th and 18th century, in central and northern Italy, the insolvent debtor and the creditors often regulated their debt and credit relationships by means of private agreements, which were recognized by statutes and, if approved by a qualified majority under certain circumstances, were effective vis-à-vis other creditors, even if dissenting. In the Venetian Republic, the recourse to agreements of a private nature and the recognition by legislation was even greater. The Republic of Venice in the north of Italy can be considered the most important international maritime and financial hub in 13th, 14th centuries. Excellent shipbuilders, the Arsenale was considered one of the best shipyards in the world, conquerors, but above all, highly business-oriented merchants and negotiators. In the Parte del Maggior Consiglio, the government of the Venetian Republic in 1395, it is specified that the safe conduct, the fida, must be granted if he hands over his books and his belongings. All this without asking the opinion of the creditors and without them being able to do everything possible to ensure that debtors and creditors reached an agreement. In other words, court mediation. The rationale of this orientation was to help those who were in that situation. However, it's highly probable that in addition to the aim of helping debtors, the Venetian legislators were striving in every way possible to maintain commercial activity in their territory. And the use of negotiation to resolve commercial disputes was therefore the practice in Venice. This can be deduced not only from the legislation enforced in the 13th and 14th centuries, but also from the content of the play La Bancarotta, The Bankruptcy, 1741, by Carlo Goldoni, a Venetian playwright and lawyer. The excessive duration of trials and the low quality of justice seems to have been a well-known problem in 16th centuries in Italy. According to Guicciardini in Florence, in fact, I believe that the judgments of the Turks, which are disposed quickly and almost at random, are not as bad as the manner of the judgments that are commonly used among Christians, because the language of these judgments matters so much both for the expenses and for the disturbances that are given to the litigants, that it does not harm, perhaps, that the judgment should be issued in the first day of the trial. If we assume that the judgments of the Turks are given in the Turk, it follows that half of them are fair, but they are unfair, not less than those given among us, either through the ignorance or the malice of the judges. Generally, there were individuals in charge of maintaining social peace in all communities. The 1465 Statute of Gaborano, which was a little castle inside the Republic of Siena, central Italy, states, we want an order that the priors of the Castle of Gaborano are required to elect 2 good and discreet men to be called Paciari del Comune, village peacemakers. Their job is to settle any disputes and remove any differences that arise or arise for any reason between the individuals of Gaborano, bringing them, the parties, back to harmony to avoid rancor, enmity, hate, and ill will. On February the 1st, 1770, Pietro Leopoldo, Granduca of Tuscany, established in Florence the first chamber of commerce in order not to cause the litigants unnecessary expenses and defatigations. To this end, it will be the regular chamber to ensure on all suitable occasions that its chancellors and other ministers intervene with their mediation in order to suggest amicable settlements to the parties and to facilitate their implementation, especially for cases of small importance. And if this do not take place, the auditor will have to decide the cases as long as they do not exceed the sum of 30 lira. In other words, med, then arb. Settlement of disputes outside the courts was quite widespread in Europe. In 18th century in Holland, it was compulsory for citizens to go before conciliators without the assistance of lawyers before going to ordinary courts. This had been pointed out by the philosopher Voltaire in a letter dated 1745. The best law, the most excellent practice, the most useful I have ever seen is in Holland. When two men want to dispute against each other, they are obliged to go first to the court of conciliation judges, called peacemakers. If the parties arrive with a lawyer and a prosecutor, the latter are first removed, like wood from a fire that is to be put out. The peacemaker says to the parties, you are great fools to want to consume your money and make each other unhappy. We will accommodate you without costing you anything. And if rage of the dispute is too strong in these litigants, they are deferred to another day so that time may soften the symptoms of their illness. Then the judges send them to a second, a third time. If their madness is hopeless, they're allowed to plead, just as gangrenous members are abandoned to the amputation of surgeons. Their justice makes its move. This letter of Opathen judiciary, which would judge minor disputes without formality and also try to maintain peace and harmony by preventing litigation, was brought to Italy by the Napoleonic private citizens, and the principle was reiterated a few decades later in the Royal Decree of 1931. In a letter of the 1907 from Sub-Prefect Petri, Naples, addressed to his chief officers, a single official in charge of the judicial police is insufficient. The same must attend the many conciliations that are carried out precisely to prevent further crimes. Therefore, judicial police activities and conciliation were placed on the same level of relevance. Article 36 of Royal Decree in 1891, regulation of prosecution in the interest of public order, public health, and morality. A possible conciliation was envisaged in the case of women present in houses of prostitution who intended to return to an honest life. They are presumed to be the owners of the clothes made for their person, and so of their personal underwear. But if a dispute arises over the ownership of such clothes and underwear or other objects that the woman has for her own, the public security authority will call before it the contending parties in order to attempt a conciliation. In 1880, the Justice of Peace issued 70% of all judgments delivered in Italy. And according to law issued in 1892, the judge, in order to reach a conciliation, could call for a single party in a private hearing. I underline, in 1892, the judge, in order to reach a conciliation, could call for a single party in a private hearing, a real ante litteram caucus. Before the First World War, the Italian bankruptcy law in 1903 also provided for negotiation agreements on the settlements of the debtor crisis under the control of the judge, who, in small claims, could also act as a mediator. In the 19th century, Italian conciliators were known as a trial and were directed by the same judge who, in case of failure, would have had to decide. It was a poor, predominantly rural country in which there were individuals who played the role of social conciliators, individuals who no longer exist. As Zimmerman Bowman tells, quoting Robert Castle, the hypervalorization of the individual, which has taken place in recent decades, has also led, with the liberalization from the ties of belonging to family or professional structures, to a growing feeling of insecurity and the progressive loss of mutual trust. And this is reflected in what is roughly called litigiousness, which is also due to an increasing well-being, great awareness of one's right, and less social resignation. The totalitarian regime carried out during the fascist period, 1922-1943, disliked conflict resolutions reached by privates for over 70 years. I underline, in Italy, mediation since the 30s was no longer taught in university. Mediation was and still is part of the Italian legal tradition, but it was forgotten. The Civil Procedure Code of 1942, Article 183, provided the possibility of conciliation managed by the judge in a pre-trial hearing. Nevertheless, it was always a pure formality. In 1933, Lule number 580 ruled each Italian Chamber of Commerce had to set up a conciliation and arbitration chamber. And the Havar mediation procedure model was the reference. At a very slow pace, ADRs started their way contemporaneously. The legislative decree in 2003 ruled voluntary mediation in corporate, financial, and banking controversies, very broad topics with substantial number of disputes. But on the contrary, it was not compulsory. In 2009, there were almost 6 million pending civil litigation cases in the overall judicial system in Italy, the highest number ever reached. In 2010, compulsory civil and commercial mediation took off. It came into force in 2011. It was revoked in October 2012 and reintroduced in September 2013 with some innovations. Among others, compulsory lawyers' assistance to the parties, the first information meeting free of charge, and the possibility for the parties to opt out of the meeting free of charge. In the 2011-2019 period, there has been a decrease in civil court litigations, minus 4% per year, mainly because of the economic crisis and thanks also to mandatory mediation. A strong increase in proceedings, 2% per year, and a strong increase in mediated settlement agreements, 14%, was Giuseppe Prezzorini wrote 1 century ago in the Code of the Italian Life in 1921. It is not absolutely true that in Italy there is no justice. It is, however, true that it is not necessary to ask the judge, but rather the deputy, the minister, the journalist, the influential lawyer, etc., for justice. The thing can be found. The address is wrong. Moreover, in Italy, there's been neither the industrial, neither the bourgeois revolution, but only the self-proclaimed fascist revolution, which was the maintenance of the status quo. Therefore, Italians do not like innovations too much. In the Luchino Visconti 1963 classic movie, The Leopard, there is an enlightening sentence. Everything must change so that nothing changes. And last but not least, judicial proceedings usually last too many years. So in the case of a dispute, many people are aware of a proverb: there is always time to pay and to die. And if there are payments to be made, they are delayed in time. The closing questions are: can knowledge of our society's mediation culture help in the spread and proper use of contemporary mediation? And how can we make the culture of mediation useful? Suggestions from the experience of other countries are very welcome. Many thanks for your patience.
So Giovanni, what I will do is I just go through the points that I have in your presentation. So I'll just give me 1 second. I'll just share the screen and then we can take it up with the other people, whatever they have, because some points we can discuss the way I was looking at them.
Please put your question and comments in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's just go through what you had put up there. So basically you're saying that do it as early as possible while the relationship is there. That's what you were saying. This is given there in the Bible, right? So relationship should be there. Do it as early as possible. That's one thing that's been told to us.
Sure. As soon as possible.
Now this,
it
it says in the 16th century, there was excessive duration of trials and low quality of justice. So nothing has changed in these years. At least in a country like India, the excessive duration of trials is huge. But what is the average in Italy in terms of the court cases? How much time do they take?
Which was the situation at that time.
Right now, what is it in Italy? How much time does it take?
Well, I think that the lawyers and judges like very much to discuss about the single pieces of law, and they just were very interested in the technicalities of the quarreling of the process, and not the real problems underneath of the conflict. And so the problem that when you start thinking too much only to the law, only to the articles, only to the technicalities of law, well, you don't take attention to the underlying problems. And I think that this will, well, we say that Italy is the cradle of the law. And that of all other problem, because it's in our characteristic just to speak about the single articles of the law and not on the underlying problems. And it's very interesting to understand that now the government is trying to change the civil proceedings just in a way to restrain the time, or if possible, always in the first meeting of judges with lawyers and parties. The similarity between the 16th century Italy and 21st century Italy now is really astonishing.
Yes.
But I think the problem is how law is taught in universities.
No, what I'm trying to see is, Giovanni, is that since the 16th century, if this was the issue, why have we not moved away from it? I think that is one question we'll have to ask ourselves, because the other part of this, when you say that the judgments of the Turks are given in the dark, it follows that half of them are fair, but they are unfair not less than those given among us, which means that if that whole process doesn't end up being fair.
I think this is a paradox, of course, but Guicciardini was a very, very wise person with a lot of international experience in France and other places, not only in Italy. He governed Florence in the 16th century for a while, and he did very good things. And I think there is a paradox, but the problem is just the length of the civil proceedings. The same problem that now. It will take quite a long time, but get it as a paradox, and the situation of contemporary Italy was not very different from the situation in the 16th century.
No, Giovanni, I think it is a very interesting comment that at the whole judicial process, if at the end of the day, the fact that your decisions can actually be such that they are not at all, I mean, you can go 50-50 kind of, it's almost as good as that. So then what is the justice being dispensed even at that stage? But okay, we'll move on. So this is important. Individuals in charge of maintaining social peace in the communities, I think this is where we have to, which is what I'm trying to do. Let us go into the communities, let them identify those people, the village peacemaker. I really liked that concept. And this is...
the problem is how large the communities are. How technically involved they are, because if you have a small community, it's not so difficult to find people who try to manage as peacemakers. But if you have very large communities with technical problems, with richness, it's very difficult to find these local peacemakers, the village peacemakers. Well, in a village, they can work. In Italy, until the 50s of the last century, the peacemaker in the village were the priest, the carabinieri, and the chemist, who were the most educated people in that village. And the usual patient went to them just to be counseled and to solve their problems. Also because to go to course was extremely expensive. And so they prefer just to solve the problem with the help of the priest in a very short time.
But I think, Giovanni, one thing we'll have to also, like I was discussing in the first opening session, that we'll have to distinguish between the priest being a mediator, or did the priest bring in certain social pressure or other pressure? Was he in a position of authority, which we go back to the Singapore Convention, and we say that the person should not have the authority to impose a decision. So what do you think was the situation then?
There is a very nice movie in Italian, Pane, Amore, Fantasia, Bread, Love, and Fantasy, of the late 50s, where just located in a small village, where all these problems, all these conflicts were solved just by the three people I told you before. And if you can see this movie, you will understand what I mean, what was the situation also in Italy until 70 years ago. The priest, well, in Italy, the Catholic Church has a relevant position because of historical reasons, of course. And in all small villages, there were, not now, but there were a parish. And it was the point of reference for a lot of people, especially for women, just to discuss their problems, just to get advices, and so on. It was not a problem of faith. It was a problem just of relationship. I don't know if I explained myself, but please try to find this movie, Bread, Love, and Fantasy by De Sica, D-E-S-I-C-A, Pane, P-A-N-E, Amore, Love, A-M-O-R-E, Fantasia, F-A-N-T-A-S-I-A. It will explain perfectly the situation and what you would like to realize the village pacemakers. It could be realized in a short part of a large town. As for example, I read it happened in the USA in the 60s and the 70s. And it also be used with people living in the same block. But when there are large towns, it's very difficult to have these figures. I mean, okay, they are given any authority. For example, in China, the community mediators is more an arbitrator than a mediator. And this is from a culture. What is the importance of the family, of the caste, the relationship to the others. And this is a problem of cultural influences. So village pacemakers, it could be tried to do it in schools. It could be tried to do it in blocks, in small districts inside towns, because otherwise there will be more mediators than more arbitrators than mediators.
But Giovanni, I think what we also need to maybe work out is that how many peacemakers or mediators do you need per how much population? So for every 1,000 population, do you need one mediator or a peacemaker, or you need more? I mean, for more higher population. So I think that also is important because
I had a personal experience in a block in Rome where I have a small flat, and we had to discuss because a question with the block just in the nearby. Well, the lawyer was absolutely right, absolutely fair. I underlined the opportunity to solve the problem without going to court? Well, we were only 15, 20 people, no more. But the main point that was followed was there is always time to pay and to die. If you can delay the payment, it's better to delay it. Also, just going to court. And this is another problem. Well, if the court proceeding is extremely expensive, as in the USA and in UK, mediation is much used. But if the court proceeding is not so expensive, well, people just prefer to delay payments.
Because I was looking like these days, my focus is on this aspect of the village peacemaker, because they are already there. We know they are there. So I'm talking about my research in India. So they're already there. So now all we have to do is to be able to make it a profession for them. So I think that is one important aspect that how I look at it. And from my end, I'm saying that because our village units are not so big. So small, they're still that way. I mean, okay, maybe 7,000, 8,000 population, maybe 10,000, some of them. So so that is a small unit, but you need 2 in them or 3 in them. What is the situation right now? So I'm trying to get that information from people in those areas. Let's see how it works out. So I think this is a very important thing. Now, this is what I was trying to understand, that was it actually mediation? Did they have some kind of a authority situation with them?
Sometimes the authority, also the judge, can act not as an arbitrator, but as a mediator.
Is that a good thing? Is that a good thing that the same judge can be a mediator, and then if the mediation doesn't go through, should become a judge?
Extremely good question. Extremely good questions. It depends from the attitude of the single person. But I prefer, and in Italy, we are following the model that judge refer contending parties to an external mediator. And I think that is much better, because it's preferable to distinguish the two persons. For example, in the hybrid ADRs, in hybrid mediation models, where there is the connection between mediation and arbitration, in many countries, they allow also that the same people be the mediator and arbitrator. According to my opinion, on the contrary, mediator must be a different profession from the arbitrator. And so I think that also judge is much better that he refers the two contending parties to an external mediator. But if he says something more, people just have more things just to try to solve the problems. This is very interesting what's happening in the Italian judiciary. At the beginning, in 2011, when the mandatory mediation started, they considered mediation just a child of lesser God. Little by little, they started to understand the utility of the new proceeding. But there was the opportunity for people, just for 30 parties, just to opt out of the mediation. Judge sent people to mediation, to external mediator. Parties and their lawyers went to mediation just to declare they didn't want to continue on the proceeding. Just to avoid this loss of time and money, some judges started to say, well, consider that this is the context of the competition, and there could be these different solutions. Try to avoid them, especially to avoid huge expenses, and there could be some different opportunities. Now they are starting to introduce the zone, the limits, the boundaries of the mediation proceedings. And this is a very interesting opportunity. I don't know if I answer to you. I think that judge must be different from mediator. But now in Italy, judges just to spend people, just to go to mediation, try and then just really try the opportunity. They're telling, well, there could happen things. Try to avoid them.
No, because the way, Giovanni, how I look at it is that why I wanted that we should go into history is because today, whatever is now happening is basically because of desperation. So a lot of things will be tried. Let's do this, let's do that, let's make this law. But that is because desperation has happened because the backlog is huge. But let us see what why the history thing is there, because in those many years, why did it move away from mediation? Why did that whole concept of litigation still continue, even though there were issues like what we saw, there was already a backlog there. So we'll have a look at that.
According to this problem, please, I refer to another article of mine, Judiciary in Italy. I wrote 1.5 years ago. If you're interested in the subject,
please,
try to find it. Otherwise, I'll send you the links.
Yeah, please send it, and you can also circulate it. So settlement disputes was quite widespread.
Settlement disputes, the court compulsory to go before without the assistance of lawyers before going to ordinary courts.
Yeah. So one is it was quite widespread.
Without the assistance of lawyers.
Yes, exactly. That was what I was getting at. That
the mandatory mediation came to force in Italy in 2011. And it was not compulsory, the assistance of lawyers to parties in mediation. Anyway, in the 87% of mediation proceedings, parties came assisted with the lawyers, even if it was not compulsory. And in many situations, the presence of lawyers was very useful. The problem is that when parties send lawyers without being present, the parties themselves. So in mediation, there are only lawyers without knowing exactly what's happening and what's their underlying interest.
But again, Giovanni, you're going into the present situation. I'm saying in 1745, they understood something. That's why I said compulsory for citizens to go before conciliators without the assistance of lawyers. It was compulsory. So
in Holland and in some countries in the nearby.
But I'm just saying that means they understood something there, which I think we maybe have to look at. Why did that happen? Was the legal profession, has it gone into a certain direction, which should not have happened? And that's happened for quite so many years. Okay, but preventing litigation is okay. I found this very interesting. Police officers must first of all reconcile conflicts among private citizens. I think this whole police mediation by itself is an important area to develop. There's someone in Spain. There's Antonio Berlanga who's doing it there.
Well, do you know that in the peacekeeping forces, the Italian Carabinieri are highly regarded? Do you know Italian Carabinieri? It's military police, but they're trained not to fire if a person is in a certain place or before or after a certain line. They're trained, first of all, to speak and to understand. And they are military police. And they are highly renowned in the peacekeeping international organizations, just because of this attitude. The police officers, first of all, must reconcile conflicts among private citizens. Later on, just apply laws. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think we need to develop this around the world.
And in Grosseto, the small town where I live, the head of police 5 or 7 years ago, 10 years ago, just trying to strictly apply this principle, and the results were very, very interesting.
Okay, so basically,
especially with young people.
Okay, so here caucusing was something which was definitely that. My more important was this 1922 to 1943. This aspect, what I'm looking at it, we have to obviously study it from other countries also. That is this the period that change happened in certain parts of the world, where the fact that you wanted that whole concept of that the private citizens should not be able to get together. Was there?
Ever think that in that period, before that period, the Italian Red Cross was a private organization. In that period, it became a public organization. The firemen were managed before that period on a local, by local authorities. In that period, they became a nationalized organization. So the fascists tried to make public almost everything, and the conflict must be managed by public authority, the judges, the sentences.
Because what you're going to do,
I give you the example of the Red Cross.
Because Giovanni, but how I'm looking at it, which I will also announce, is on the last day, on the 30th of September, in the about 5:30, we'll have a special session on how colonization has affected mediation around the world. So we will also look at that how did that change the whole setup in countries, and did they in some way discourage, or they made sure? We'll have a look at it. We'll discuss it as we go along.
Colonization is a huge problem.
Yeah, so we'll discuss that. Yeah, we'll do it, because once all the sessions have gone through, then we'll have a special discussion on that. Okay, so basically,
I'm not aware of this problem, because fortunately Italy got colonized just for a very short period.
But around the world, yeah, we'll have a look. Okay. So here also, I mean, okay, so this is all the current system which you were spoken about. This is important. I mean, say about for 7,000 people, there is a judge. So that didn't work out. So that means we need, for about, like I said, for 1,000 people, maybe we need a mediator. So we're talking about 7 million, 8 million mediators out there.
242,000 lawyers.
Yeah,
I think the most relevant number is the number of lawyers. In the city of Rome, there are as many lawyers as in all France.
Okay, I think that's about what I was looking at. So let us just take it. If there's anything, I think Shefan, okay, I think we have some questions here. So David has something. You describe a long history of conciliation. So why do 6 million Italians take their disputes to court every year? Do you want to take that, Giovanni?
Yeah.
He says that you describe a long history of conciliation. So why do 6 million Italians, 60 million it should be, 60 million Italians take their disputes to court every year? What is the mentality, why the culture of mediation has not spread?
The problem, the very small claims, and the problem that also for a contest of 10,000 euros, you can arrive also to the Supreme High Courts. There are not very many filters, just avoid the overuse of court proceedings. And also the number of lawyers became a social problem, because they can raise money through court proceedings, and not especially through mediation.
So basically the culture.
First of all, every people can ask judge to analyze its problem. And our constitutional law is very important. And the Article 24 just says that the law of anyone can be analyzed in court proceeding, also for very, very small amount of money. And because of these technicalities, because of the high level of our revenues in the last decades, many people forgot completely the peacemakers in small situation, in small groups, and they try just to be helped by lawyers just to resolve their conflicts, just in tribunals.
Okay. So what we'll do is,
it became a social problem.
Basically, what we need to do is, this is the last question we'll take up, because in the next 3 minutes, Shefan's session starts. So basically, Reza wants to know how Italy uses mediation in investments and international trade. Is it in the statutes or just considered a business custom between investors?
The statute, which kind of statute? By whom? Because you know very well that there has been the Singapore Convention on Mediation 2 years ago. The problem is how to apply it and how it is used. For example, no European Union subscribed the convention. And it's really a problem of willingness by the single contendants just to use international commercial mediation. I don't know what's the situation in India. India subscribed the convention, the Singapore Convention.
We signed it.
And yes, it was also undersigned by your government or your parliament.
We haven't ratified it yet. Not yet. Okay, so no, but what about the European Union? Between the European Union, what is the situation with mediation? Internally, there is some arrangement on mediation. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
European Union trying to, well, there was a directive in 28 just underlying the importance of mediation and the necessity to use it. Many countries started with laws on mediation, but I think that Italy is just in the forefront of using it, just because of the huge backlog we have in civil courts. Other countries now are starting little by little. And the problem is mandatory mediation has to be introduced or not. I think that we've been the first one to use mandatory mediation in the last 20 years in European Union, but also now also England, also United Kingdom, is starting to think to mandatory mediation to be used in that country.
Yeah. Okay. No, please. Because I'm just saying that I want to ask Shefan if it's all right with her, because now her time starts. But if she had something to say, I'll just ask her. Shefan, it's totally up to you. We can end the session right now because your session starts, or you can give us 5 minutes more.
I can, of course, I can give 5 minutes more. In fact, 8 minutes more, because I am also listening into what Mr. Giovanni has to say.
Okay,
it's a learning experience, Vikram.
But you said you wanted to ask him something.
You give me those 5 minutes more.
Okay, you wanted to ask him something, you said, because like now your time, everyone else was not allowed to ask, you are, because now your time starts. So is there anything you wanted to ask him?
Mr. Giovanni, how do you compare the mediation system? In fact, it would be a very general question. I'm not a trained mediator, but what would you suggest for a mediator, a beginner, to go with into mediation?
Training, and co-mediation with expert mediators, and just to learn how it works. Because it's necessary to have a very good basis, but experience is extremely important. I started interested in mediation with a university master of 160 hours in presence, and not only 50. Well, I just started to understand something of mediation after the 10th mediation I managed. So training, experience, preferably with a co-mediators, with a more experienced mediator, and trying to grasp what's possible for his experience. And another very important things, the relevance of culture. Cultural differences in any country, also in my country, as relevant. And I think that you are Indian. Yes, you're a huge nation and with an incredible history. And the cultural differences in these situations, I think that must be very taken account, I think a very big account. You are very young, you will have time just to learn, but experience.
Okay, at this point, I think, Giovanni, I'll have to just come in. Basically, you said training, and on the other side, you said how big the country is. We had 1.3 billion people. And the fact that there are some natural mediators in villages. This village peacemaker is a person that the village already trusts. My idea is to bring them out. They have the natural ability. You don't have to train someone who's already using it. You said experience, they're already experienced. So I'm taking it from that level. The other aspect is that, yes, we will put up training for everyone to watch. On the YouTube channel, we'll have the best in the world putting out their modules. We'll do that. The idea is that people should get the benefit from people all over the world. I'll put something up there, but for us, we can't be focused on that because we don't. Where are the trainers? I mean, how would you actually reach those numbers? Who's going to get those trainers out? So there is a large area where it needs to be discussed. So I don't think it's as simple as an answer which you were saying, because you're talking about 60 million people. We are talking about 1.3 billion people. So there's a lot of things. So there's no general thing in the world which we can put out. There are a lot of things which we have to get into on this. So we won't get into that. This is a totally different area. I mean, the idea is that here we're talking about the mediation in our culture. So we'll stick to that. So what I'll do is at this point of time, Giovanni, if it's okay, I can end this session. Are you okay with that? Shefan, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Giovanni. It was really nice of you to take out time.
Thanks to you all.
And what I'll do is now.
And now listen to Shefan.
Okay. No, what I do is let me just stop the recording at this stage, and also the